that's actually how we started. But one of the things I really loved about this property here is that since it's the original place where this rum was created, we still have some historical buildings from the 19th century. As I mentioned, the house over there, which by the way, still in use as a residence. There's a descendant of the family still living in there. The person that lives in there is actually the grandson of Pedro Fernandez, so he's the grandson of the founder, Ron Del Barrilito. But besides the house, we have that tower over there. That tower originally used to be a windmill. It was used to crush and grind sugarcane. This one in particular was built in 1827. Now eventually, sugar industry something was abandoned here, so they took the tower and converted it into an office, which we were actually using as an office till like 6 months ago. Yeah, so quite recently. What happened was basically they hired like 2 more people, so now they were like in a cramped space, so they had to move the office to the actual factory over there. So now we're like brainstorming, looking for what to do with the building next. So I don't know, maybe we turn it like a VIP lounge, or we should turn it like an Airbnb. Now everybody turning Airbnb to everything. So, but don't fool yourself. It's a pretty old building, but it's actually well updated. It has Wi-Fi, air conditioner. So that's actually pretty cool. So
they're really advertising it.
We have a better view of the tower here.
Maybe they're already advertising Airbnb.
We should record the tour later too.
I'm sorry?
We should record the tour later of the old town.
Sure.
But this one is mostly
Maybe I'm a little
for
tipsy right now.
display. Puerto Rico basically there's
Look at this
like
car. Look at this car. So cute. Original Bacardi car, guys.
From other countries around the world. So this is the actual factory where we make a rum. This factory was built around 1943. The corners are aging warehouses. Middle section over there, that's our bottling area. And the little workshop here, this is our cooper station. Here's where we fix barrels, give them maintenance. And by the way, this is one of the things I find really cool about the rum. The wood of the barrels is American white oak, which is actually the most popular type of wood for aging products like rums and whiskeys. Main difference is that most rum makers are gonna buy their barrels already used from bourbon makers in the States, reuse them. In our case, we don't buy these barrels from Kentucky or Tennessee, we actually import ours from Spain. Because these ones were used instead for aging oloroso sherry wine in the Jerez region of Spain. So that Spanish wine that is absorbed by the oak is gonna provide a rum a different flavor profile, which kind of, more like a brandish flavor profile to it. And this was actually one of the influences of Pedro Fernandez. And actually I find this really fascinating because it's quite rare to find rums that are fully aged in a sherry cask. Most of them are aged in a bourbon barrel, so I will say something makes a rum a little bit different from other rums made here in Puerto Rico. And that also explains as well why the size of the barrels. So you notice they're no longer barrilitos, they're big barrels now. They're much bigger as well than a standard bourbon barrel. This one can hold around 132 gallons capacity. Empty like this is around 200 pounds, so they're quite heavy as well. But when they're full with rum, it can weigh to about 1,200 pounds, so that's a very heavy barrel. And also we reuse them a couple of times, in average 5 to 7 times, in an average lifespan between 35 to 40 years, so we give them quite a good use. But eventually, comes to a certain point that you cannot extract any more flavor out of the wood, so we need to decommission them. What we do afterward, we just recycle wood however we can. Sometimes we just cut the barrels like in half. We make planters out of them. You can see a couple around here. The lid of the barrels, we use those for decoration in the visitor center. And the long pieces of wood, the staves, we cut them like in small squares, and that's actually what we use in the bar. The bartender, for example, places a cinnamon stick on top, burn it, and small glass for old fashioned. So that's actually one of our ways to recycle it here. I mean, it's oak, it's a great wood, so it would be a shame just to throw that to the garbage. So let me continue showing the rest of the factory here. So,
What type of wood?
American oak. Yes. So let's continue over that side so I can show you the aging warehouse as well. But from here as well, the only thing that you will see that is brand new around here are the big tanks in here. So let's gather around this side. So they're finishing with the installation, but this is to eventually increase the capacity of how much alcohol base or all the rum base that we can store in here, and also to improve logistics. Really important, guys, that yes, we're a rum factory, but we're no longer a distillery. So the process to ferment and distill molasses, we no longer do that in here. We actually stopped doing that after the 1930s. Thing is, well, distillation is something that is quite expensive nowadays due to energy costs. You need to build massive distillation towers. So that's why since then, basically we kind of subcontract another distillery, and then according to our specifications, that distillery is going to make the alcohol base for us. Very important though, that rum base, first of all, it has to come from molasses, sugarcane, in order to call it rum here in Puerto Rico. And secondly, it's going to be very strong in alcohol, over 85% of alcohol, and clear like water. So you can think of that rum base kind of like having a blank canvas in which then we can paint our own art here. But once we have that rum base in here, we're gonna do our own magic. We do the rest of the process. We do age the rum here. We do the blendings and even the bottling as well. Right? Sure.
Since when you stopped distilling?
Since the 1930s.
1930.
Yeah.
Do you source all from one distillery?
So contracts can change from time to time. I mean, can expire from time to time. Okay. Sometimes it could be distilleries from Puerto Rico, or sometimes as well, like for example, Dominican Republic.
So you source from various places?
Yeah. We're not one only place. So the good thing is actually we use the source of our alcohol-based rum base is from distillation columns rather than pot stills. So the advantage of using distillation columns allows you to obtain a much more standardized alcohol base, or more consistent. So in that case, according to our specifications, really doesn't matter where it comes from.
Gotcha.
Because that's why I compare it like to a blank canvas.
For sure.
So it doesn't change our flavor profile to us. And then we do the rest of
barrel
the process.
works the magic.
Exactly.
Right. For sure. So I'm sorry, what these three tanks for? What's the function?
So it's to actually hold the rum base, the alcohol base.
Oh,
yes.
So the rum base. So it's not the fermentation process.
No.
It's afterwards.
Exactly. So basically we skip the fermentation process, distillation. So that's why we hire subcontract another distillery. So once we have the alcohol base here, we can actually store it here.
So you do the formulation and stuff.
Exactly.
Historically, did they use any of the old recipes from like and was any kind of like, do you know any kind of slavery trade that was used, or sugar cane areas that were used for this type of purposes? Or
You mean the formula, the recipe?
that's right. Yes, the recipe. Was it historically? Did he have any history to that? And then he may be able taking over his family history in far creating this type of distillery.
So the recipe or the formula is actually Pedro Fernandez.
Okay.
In the sense that basically, since back in that time period, that basically what it was produced in the Caribbean, of course, was sugarcane.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So there's this excess of molasses as a byproduct.
That's right.
Process.
That's right.
So when his family sent Pedro to study to France, well, he was becoming an engineer.
Right.
So when he returned back here, basically his family still had the sugarcane plantation.
That's right.
So basically there was this excess of molasses. So it was like he started initially kind of like a hobby, start experimenting with the process of making rum.
I see.
Basically, little by little, developing his own rum formula.
Right. I mean, rum was used in the English Navy in 18th century as a form of payment for the Navy soldiers.
Yeah, actually,
So that
it was actually given as a ration to British sailors.
That's
actually.
right. That's
I
correct.
think they stopped doing that. Actually, it was in the 1970s. They
That's
started
correct.
doing something like that.
It was
Actually,
recently.
pretty
It's quite recent.
So very likely, rum was developed in the Caribbean. Very likely, maybe late 16th century, early 18th century. because of that, basically it's a cause and effect. Since it
Right.
was basically that sheer production in the Caribbean.
Correct.
So initially, molasses was kind of a waste of the process.
That's right.
But somebody realized or saw that you can actually ferment the molasses and you
Right.
can get alcohol from that.
That's right.
But eventually another person started making very likely a homemade type of pot still, something like that, and start distilling that and see what happens, and voila, you have basically rum.
Right.
But that initial rum that was developed in the Caribbean wasn't definitely the rum that we're used to drink nowadays.
Correct.
That
Right.
rum definitely was kind of like moonshine style. It was,
Right,
I
right, right.
bet by that time was really harsh. That's actually why it was called like the Kill Devil.
That's
Because
right.
It was really.
I think the
really
rum was
bad.
more consumed than water at the time.
Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly.
People were afraid to get poisoned by water, but they liked the rum. Correct.
It was distilled, so definitely more pure. But eventually, it's actually a process. It's actually a process that it took a few centuries.
Right.
Very likely as well. Very likely, as I mentioned, sailors. Very likely, or I mean, barrels was as well a method of storing stuff.
Right. Right.
So very likely they start storing rum in the barrels, and actually after trying it maybe a few months, it was like, oh, this actually tastes different. Now it tastes actually better.
Right.
And people little by little were realizing that actually after you leave that spirit a couple months or eventually years,
Right.
it will become much better.
Excellent.
And then very likely as well, people actually, at least here in Puerto Rico, was people, for example, like Pedro Fernandez and other people that especially went to France or start importing the technology from Europe, better made distillation pot stills,
Right.
allows them to obtain a much higher quality of the distilled alcohols
That's
as well.
right.
So that definitely as well will contribute to the development of how we know rum today.
Got it.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So it's a slow process that
Right.
takes
One
time.
One more quick thing.
Yeah.
Was Pedro Fernandez's innovation using sherry barrels then? Is that his contribution? Was sourcing ex-sherry barrels?
So
Or
basically,
was he getting other types of barrels as well?
so initially maybe there was actually experimenting, but remember that his inspiration
Right,
was
right,
cognac,
right.
brandies.
Or right, so okay.
Exactly. So he wanted to give kind of like a similar profile, and the sherry barrels is the one that will provide him that flavor profile that he wanted to achieve.
Because those were accessible here.
No, he will actually import them.
Oh, he was
He
importing
imported
them. Okay.
from Spain.
Cool.
And remember that actually back by that point, Puerto Rico still was a Spanish colony.
Oh, okay.
And it was much easier as well to
Of course.
bring barrels from Spain than
That makes
from
sense.
France.
That makes sense.
So that's actually he keep using the
So they were
barrels,
they were
yes.
available. I mean, even if you bring them in, it's easier to get.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And eventually also sherry wine became actually quite popular over time. Eventually, so there's now
Well, at least I pre-warned you. But that's a great villa, no? Baby, what do you think about the villa?
It's beautiful.
Actually, it's a good tour. Come on, you okay? You bored? Oh shit. It's alright, we'll do some, taco tour. He's hungry, poor guy.
Oh, cool. Now we get to go inside.
Oh man. You know, British Navy in 1970s abandoned the ration that they used to give in rum. They used to pay you in rum, bro. If you were, I know, that's what I'm telling
It
you.
smells good. It smells so sweet.
Damn. All right, we'll take one of those home.
Oh, look at that.
Wow, that's gorgeous. Man, going to my podcast. Joking. Be careful of steps. That's crazy. Sorry, guys.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Good.
Sorry. No problem. No problem.
You're the wrong lover.
I am exactly, yeah.
envasado is the actual date when it was filled. So in this particular case, this rum is aging since 2013. But if you look around you, you will notice a lot of different dates as well. You can find new rums from 2019, 2018. But if you look around here as well, you can find some rums from the 1980s.
Wow. What's the average fermentation age, or what's the recommended fermentation age for the rum, basically?
For the many years of the rum age,
Yes.
it's actually depending on the product.
Okay.
Because we do blends. For
Okay.
example, to make a Barrilito 2 stars, for example, in average is a blend of rums aging between 3 to 5 years old.
Okay.
The 3 stars, for example, is a blend of rums aging between 6 to 10 years old. 4 stars, 10 to 20, and the 5 stars, which is aged up to 35 years.
Oh wow.
So that's our oldest rum here in as part of the product.
Just like a wine, basically, it's as more of a age that passes, as more reputable becomes.
Basically,
That's what I'm trying
in
to
here
find
as
out.
well, remember, rum, just like whiskeys and all that, tequilas, they're a distilled spirit, so they don't really go bad in barrel.
Okay.
But something that has a huge impact on how rum develops in the barrel, for example, is weather. And in here, as you can notice, we don't control the temperature of the warehouse, so it's not constant. Weather change. Some days are hotter than others, and also heat tends to rise. So the barrels that are on top of the rack, those are actually hotter and aging faster than the ones on the bottom.
Oh, I see.
So the final result is that, and also actually another thing that has an impact is that many times you have reused the barrel over and over.
All right.
So there's not a single barrel here that tastes exactly the same. So for us, in order to achieve consistency, make sure that every bottle of that same product tastes always the same, we have to do blending.
Oh, I
And
see.
here's also where our master blender gets in, which is our chemical engineer. One of his tasks actually is gonna get into the warehouse, collect samples from the barrels. He will take it to his lab. He makes some chemistry analysis, but for the most part, he has to taste them. So it's an amazing job.
It's one hyper taster, yeah.
Yeah.
Microbials test. Is any like a bacteria?
So it's more like chemical composition and all that.
But no bacteria, no microbials living.
No, at that point, it's very, very high alcohol
Too much
content
alcohol.
here.
But you know, there's a one.
It's a very drunk bacteria.
Yeah, the drunk bacteria.
That's right.
The blue, okay, you know, the Belgian blue.
That's
the
right.
Belgian beer.
That's right.
Hurricanes
They have the
and
barrel,
all
okay.
that.
They found the microbials.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's the one church.
We
Oh,
didn't
but-
see any
In
problem with
Belgium.
the-
Microbes are one of the earliest
Yeah,
form
yeah.
of living in the United
Yeah,
States.
they got a mutation, you know, so they're used to this kind of, you know.
Maybe they can use it to
But
cure.
this is the way they make
We
the
just
best
say the same
beer.
thing, and you'll
Oh, I
see
know.
here.
If you
Exactly.
scrap off,
Evaporation loss.
the beer tastes
So
terrible.
in here,
Oh, it's
also
bacteria,
we have
exactly.
Yeah, that's the microbial.
That's right. That's right. That's
That
right.
evaporation loss is going to be higher as well.
So you actually like you keep some of the are there really old barrels on the top as well? 'Cause that seems like it was just or do they use it?
Yeah, we got you a nice bottle.
Hi.
This is Papa.
Hi, sweetie. How are you?
Papa Gianni.
Yeah.
Oh, nice glasses, Esther.
What about my glasses? You like my
You like
glasses?
his glasses?
What are you doing?
Okay, no on
You
that.
want some Bacardi, Esther?
I just buy it, love you. I just showed her some rum. They Gianni, man. But I love you this way. He's drunk.
I'm not that drunk. I'm a little tipsy.
So basically, you collect sample and you taste it. Each product that we make here have a specific flavor profile. This is what Barrilito 2 Star tastes like. This is what Barrilito 3 Star tastes like, and so forth, right?
So that's the.
So the master blender has to taste them, and he says, okay, today I need to make, for example, a new batch of Barrilito 3 Stars. In average, we select characteristics we can find from rums aging between 6 to 10 years old. And he says, all right, so from the rums that I tried here, from that range of years, in order for me to match the flavor profile of Barrilito 3 Stars, from the rums that I tried here. Let's say I had to take and mix, let's say, the characters that I found from this rum right here, mix it with the characters of this one,
Oh, so
and
the mix of
finish it with the characters of this other one. So when I combine them together, that will match that specific product to that product in particular.
Has the flavor changed from a year to another? The batches?
Not really. I mean, you can have like a slight deviation, but it's under the parameters. I mean, it's basically imperceptible to the human palate. So from every batch that we make, always we keep a bottle. So whenever they need to make a new batch, they're gonna compare. So they're gonna do panel tasting, and they're gonna gather together over there, and they will say, okay guys, let's try them both, and they will say, does it taste exactly the same as the previous batch? No, we have to come back here and fix it, blend exactly. If it tastes exactly the same, then they can authorize for bottling.
And for those that are 35 years old, like the batches, I guess, are small. You don't have to bottle.
Yeah. I mean, for example, general rule, for example, the longer you age the rum, the darker, smoother, much more complex flavors it's gonna get. But over time, it's gonna evaporate. So our products are harder to make, so you cannot make a huge product. That's why, for example, whiskeys exactly are more expensive the longer they're aged, because you're losing that product, and only a few bottles you can take out of it. And also, that's a long time you just occupy space in the warehouse. So, but
I'm sorry.
definitely whatever little is left in there is going to be amazing.
Oh, yeah.
For example, for the 5 stars, total production was between 4,000 to 5,000 bottles in 2018. We haven't done any more since then.
Oh, wow.
So it's really hard to make. It's kind of like
Have they ever
very
done?
special.
Have they ever done a single barrel, or is it always blend?
So far, no.
Just curious.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
for
it's- because remember, rum in the barrel.
So the
they don't
temperature
have,
is,
like,
is
specific
it kind of
terms.
normal temperature?
It's actually very warm.
Very warm, yeah, for
Yeah.
the you know.
Yeah, so it's a different type of temperature for wine, apparently.
So inside, basically right now, at this stage,
Yeah.
the yeast is not working anymore.
No, because of the weather. I guess it has a different conditions as far as the like a Champagne area in France. It was Champagne, area. I do want to ask about temperature. That's an interesting fact. You actually had to raise
That was
it.
the party, right?
That's correct. But you said that if you hold it too long, sometimes sugar, I guess, yeah, it's still sugar cane, right? I mean, if you have a sugar drink, sometimes it doesn't really, if you open it. All right, well, there's only alcoholics left here, guys.
Just watch your step in there.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Excellent. So what's the temperature that they're supposed to hold here, or this is all room temperature?
No, room temperature. In
Okay,
Puerto
good.
Rico, we don't use climate control units.
Okay.
Main reason is because hot weather will accelerate the aging process.
Oh, I see.
So aging rum here in Puerto Rico is actually quite faster than aging whiskey in Scotland.
Uh-huh.
The downside of that is that rum will evaporate much faster as well.
Oh, that's correct. That's correct. So it's
It's
might be.
everything trade-off.
Oh, I see.
It's pros and cons for everything.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
it does not affect the quality,
No.
the high temperature.
Actually, no. Remember that this is a distilled spirit. It's not, for example, like wine. Wine you're fermenting, so you need to have control to certain temperatures because, for example, you don't want to kill the yeast before time, or you don't want it to be really cold because the yeast kind of gets sleepy, it doesn't work really well. In rums, whiskeys, they're distilled spirits, so you don't need that. But generally speaking, hot weather will accelerate the aging process, but also you lose the product more faster as well.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
the trick. That's the balance over there. Another thing that I want to show you guys from here is actually what's in here. This is the oldest rum we have. This rum is aged since 1952.
Oh my God.
This rum actually was created by Edmundo Fernandez, which was the son of the founder of Ron Del Barrilito. And the thing is, Edmundo was the person that really believed back then in the idea of Puerto Rico ever becoming an independent country. So he created this rum with the intention to keep it Asian and use it to celebrate whenever that happened. But just a couple of months later, it's when the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico was established, so he never got the chance to see independence happening in the island. So he said in his last will that no one should use this rum until that happens. So by his last will, if that ever happens, we are supposed to take this barrel to the town square of Bayamon and share it with everybody who wants to celebrate.
This much left, right?
Exactly, if it doesn't evaporate by then, so we'll see what happens first. But if that already happens, now you know where you need to be. I guess we have to do like a Black Friday waiting line since 2 a.m. in the morning, just to make sure we get a little teaspoon. And I think it's gonna be enough for a lot of people. But nevertheless, it's a pretty fascinating piece of our history here.
Interesting.
1952.
Yes.
32 or 50.
32.
50. Kind of
50.
looks like a 3, but it's
Oh,
actually
it's-
a 5.
Oh,
So
I see.
this is the not the number.
It's actually a 5.
The 5?
Yes. So this is the oldest one we have at the moment. But still, there's actually a couple of interesting old rums in here. 79, 72 are in here. So yeah, they could be maybe used in the future to create new products, or you know, they say, pretty soon it's gonna be our 150th anniversary. Why don't we make like a very special anniversary edition, something like that? Well,
Price and Fay of Barrilito.
yeah, if they want to launch something like that, well, there's interesting old inventory that they could use for that as well. So that's why I mentioned that they don't have like specific purpose.
That's
So
cool.
my friends, if you like, you can take a picture of the barrel, no problem with that. Then when you're ready, we can go to the next room over there.
Yep.
In the next room, just watch your steps. The second one's a little bit higher.
Hey, just a bit. But is the kayak more fun than doing it on a boat? You can do it on a boat or you can do it on a kayak.
Oh. What is she asking? Who is she talking to?
All right. So my friends, this room here is actually where we start with the process of making a rum, which is a really interesting process. In here, remember as I mentioned that we start with the rum base, right? Clear like water, very strong in alcohol base, in alcohol content. Before we even age that rum base in the barrels, first in this room we're going to do what is known as Maseracion, which is another technique that Pedro was influenced by the cognac making process. Basically consists, you take a portion of that clear alcohol base to fill these tanks you see around here, and then combine it with different kind of dry fruits and spices. And we're gonna keep that for about 6 months, so the alcohol starts extracting flavors, getting complexities in here. In easy words, it's kind of making moonshine. It's actually the same concept. But once we have that maceracion ready, then we're gonna focus on the big tank here. And here, what we're gonna do next is actually according to the formula, X amount of that alcohol base, the clear one, and then from that maceracion that is ready, it will take a very small amount and mix it with the rum base in here. Simply is just to give a little bit of the fruitiness and spices. Now we don't want to use a lot of that though, because we don't want to make a spice rum or a flavor rum. We want a classification, so that's why it's very little. But once we have this initial mix, then we're going to use demineralized water so we can cut down the alcohol content, bringing it down like from 80 something to about like 50% of alcohol. And that's when finally we're going to fill the barrels and start aging the rum. And then we age it for the many years into the aging. Then we do the blending according to the flavor profile of the product. And then finally, over there, that will be our bottling area. Yeah. Another aging warehouse. Yes. In total, we have 6 of them. So in here, we don't bottle every day. We bottle like once a month, but bottling can take us about like 5 days. We make from 1,000 to 1,200 cases of one bottle.
All the barreling done here, like everything on premises?
Yeah. So there's like 2 more warehouses over there, this 2, and the other side there's 2 more warehouses for all of them. So every single barrel of Barrilito comes from the same facilities. So let me show you the bottling area here.
This is the most important part. Bottling. What did you ask Elliot to?
A él la dice gold,
Mark?
silver, bar,
Mark is gonna be with the
Y ahorita ve como lo que hice el pasillo, empezar así, la cajita donde los tubitos, cosas así.
They're like, we don't want to waste our time.
Look at that.
So, let me show you around here.
Exactly. It's just like music.
So this is our bubbling area. You know, this is not like a huge operation. It's actually pretty straightforward. We have some machinery. A couple things they still do it by hand. They still package by hand here. And also to the conveyor with the bottles, they do that by hand as well. So on that side, we'll place the empty bottles into the conveyor. Basically, we'll start spinning and from the first machine. Basically, the first machine will fill the bottle with the finished rum. There's another one next to it to the right side that basically will place a cap on top of the bottle. Over there are some of the labels. The label that goes on top of the cap that is placed by hand, and the last machine over here will apply heat so it will shrink and seal the cap. The finished bottles end up over there. From there, they will grab them, stack them in the table, and from there, they're going to start a packaging by hand. And actually, all this process is done by a very small staff. It's actually around like 80 people working here. So when it's bottling time, basically it's all hands on deck here.
Oh wow.
So this is overall we make our run here. So my friends, what we're gonna do next, when you're ready, is actually we can go back to the visitor center. Then over there, we're gonna split. So the ones who are gonna go for the rum tasting, we're gonna continue. So you can go for the tasting. For the ones who are just the heritage tour, remember you have the token. That's for a cocktail and the bar. So the party hasn't over yet. Okay? And if you already used your token, but you want another cocktail, the bar is still open, so you can buy another cocktail as well. Okay?